Sam Putnam. I lived in Salem Village, Massachusetts around 300 years ago. Salem Village was a Puritan colony where we were restricted in several aspects of our lives. You could say religion was our government back then. Any behavior that didn't strictly follow the expectations and traditions set by the elders before us was greatly frowned upon by people in the town. Every single rule was taken directly from the Bible with no room for any interpretation outside of the ones accepted. As well as rules, we were expected of certain behaviors. At any given moment, somebody could come up to you and ask you to recite all 10 Commandments from memory, and you had to be able to do it. You were also expected to be seen in church every single Sunday, and if you didn't, everyone in town thought less of you. There were only 500 people in Salem Village when I lived there, so you can only imagine how well we knew each other. When I say well, I don't mean that we got along well. There were plenty of disputes between families in the village. One of the major disputes in the town was between my family, the Putnams, and another family, the Porters, over inherited farmland. Actually, now that I think about it, a lot of the disputes in the town were traced back to my family, and that's actually one of the main reasons why I accused some of the people that I did. I regret this now, but in those moments when I accused those people, I really didn't see a problem with what I was doing. The witch hunt also didn't begin in Salem. It began in England. They had been killing people for witchcraft, for harming people and conspiring with the devil. It wasn't until we began noticing some strange events in our town that we began suspecting an evil presence among us. During my lifetime in Salem Village, many ministers came in and out of our church, and we didn't really have one settle until Reverend Paris. I will never forget him. He was the new minister in town, so everyone paid very, very close attention to him and what was going on in his house. From what I picked up on, he had a wife, Elizabeth. He had 3 kids, Thomas, Betty, and Susanna, and he had 2 slaves, Tituba and John Indian. There were mixed opinions about him. Some really enjoyed his sermons, and some thought distastefully of them. They didn't think that he went away from the idea of hell and the devil enough, and that's all he harped on. I believe that as well, that he maybe should have talked about more uplifting aspects of being children of God. But I can almost certainly tell you that he is the reason all of this started in Salem. One of his sermons, he said to all of us in church, "The devil has sent witches to infiltrate the churches in our town, and he said that it was our responsibility as citizens to destroy anybody conspiring with the devil." As I mentioned before, not many people resided in Salem. There were a few young girls in the town. We were all sort of friendly with each other. My best friend was Mary Walcott. She was 17 when all of this hysteria happened in Salem Village. I was a little bit younger, 5 years younger. I was 12. I was also friends with a girl named Mercy Lewis, as she was a servant girl in my family's residence. There was another girl that comes to mind, Abigail Williams. She was a cousin of Betty, Paris's daughter. And when Betty was the first person to fall under an illness, Abigail was right by her side throwing accusations at Tituba. We became known as the Afflicted Girls. Myself, my friends, and Abigail. being afflicted means to be troubled or bothered by some presence or something, and in this case it was a supernatural presence. Well, I made many of the accusations I did, like I said before, because of grudges and families, but I had to be present in trial if I wanted to be believed. So oftentimes I would show up and faint, or see an animal in the distance that was charging at me, and it was somebody's spirit sent upon me, and that was always taken as hard evidence in the courts. Because everyone was so terrified of these witches and people conspiring with the devil, they were almost looking for reasons to convict people, which is why all I had to do was point my finger and scream and faint, and somebody was convicted. I remember during Martha Corey's trial, I acted as if every time she moved her hand or turned her head, it would cause me pain. It would inflict pain upon me so greatly that I would scream, I would faint, to the point where they turned her around and put her behind a wall so she could no longer torment me. Along with these trials and fake fainting spells in court, there were tests people would perform on each other. Oftentimes, if you were convicted of witchcraft, you would have a nobleman or a noblewoman in the town show up at your house and question you. They would ask you questions like, can you recite all 10 commandments from memory? They would ask you why you hadn't been at church the past Sunday or the past 2 Sundays. They would ask you why you were reading books. We weren't supposed to read books other than the Bible. So I thought it was a sin because we were trying to learn more than God knows. You would be digging a deeper hole for yourself if you couldn't answer these questions in the way that they expected you to. The hysteria first began in Paris's household, which is almost ironic because he is the one who started the witchcraft scare in Salem Village. His daughter Betty fell under an unknown illness, and he refused to accept that his daughter had been bewitched even after Dr. William Griggs told him that this was the result of a supernatural presence. Betty and Abigail were the ones who accused Tituba of bewitching Betty. And after Tituba was accused, other women, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, were also accused of witchcraft. And if you want the truth, they were just easy targets. Sarah Good was a poor pregnant mother, and Sarah Osborne, she was never at church, and she was suing my family. So I had every reason to accuse her. Tituba ended up confessing, and Sarah Good accused Sarah Osborne. If you wanted to live, you pretty much had to confess, even if you were innocent. Sarah Good was eventually hung, and Sarah Osborne ended up dying in jail. The very first person to be hung because of witchcraft was Bridget Bishop. She had been married 3 times, with her first 2 husbands dying. In her second marriage, she had been seen wandering in public with bruises on her body and her face, which, of course, everybody took as her being abused by her husband. Because of her signs of abuse, many people in the village believed that she was somehow responsible for his death. Some people said that they also witnessed her stealing eggs or frightening horses. The afflicted girls, including myself, accused her of pressuring us to sign the devil's book. Some men in the village found poppets in her house, which witches would stick needles in to cause pain on people. Other men said that she would visit them in the middle of the night to try and pull them away from their wives. Looking back, this entire idea of witchcraft was very extreme, but it gets worse than what I've already told you. It wasn't only adults who were accused and thrown in jail. 3 weeks after Sarah Good's arrest, her 4-year-old daughter, Dorothy, was jailed for witchcraft. She was never hung, but a man named Roger had to pay her jail bond in order for her to be released. Animals were also killed in order to eliminate evil from the village. One time, a girl accused a dog of charging after her, trying to bewitch her, and men shot it on the spot and killed it. I may have accused poor, innocent women of witchcraft, but I would never accuse a poor dog. After so many people and animals were executed in Salem, the courts decided to make a change to how trials operated. Spectral evidence was banned, which meant that I couldn't show up and fake faint and see something and it be taken so seriously. It'd be taken as hard evidence that didn't work anymore. I realized when this change was made that the hysteria in the town had died down a little bit. People were still scared of witchcraft, but not to the same extent as they were before. Regardless of this change, people were still being killed. Dogs were shot, but that's not what they did to people. They hung people. But it wasn't a quick and easy death like you would think hanging is. Instead, the rope wasn't short enough for it to break their necks, so they sat there being strangled to death, watching everybody watch them die. One of the more important men in the town, John Proctor, was hung for witchcraft. He was accused of the same thing all of these poor women were accused of. But because he was a respected man and had a successful farm, after his death, somebody stole his body so he could receive a proper burial. Many times, the bodies were just simply thrown into a big mass grave that everyone forgot about. Finally, a woman named Martha Corey was hung, and that was the end of the executions in Salem Village. The governor of the town, William Phipps, decided to suspend the trials shortly after his wife got convicted. It's convenient timing, if you ask me. Besides the governor's wife, I do also believe that people were beginning to either grow skeptical of witchcraft itself, or they simply believed they had purged all of the witches from Salem Village. Regardless, that marked the end of my acting and all of my accusations. After all of the hysteria that went down, many people blamed Paris for their family members' deaths. Even those who were not executed were still held in jail. They had to pay in order to be released, and many of them couldn't. I did end up personally apologizing for my role in the accusations, and later on some money was given to the families as a form of reparation for what happened. Even though the trials were such an extreme part of the history of Massachusetts, it took the state until 1957 to formally apologize for the damage that had been done. Now, I'm aware of some research that has gone into this important part of my life. I know scientists have developed several theories as to why all of this may have happened. Some believe it was an ingredient in our bread, ergot, that caused hallucinations that were similar to those caused by, what's the drug now? LSD. That's it. I think that's some sort of drug. You guys consumed it. That sounds reasonable enough, but what I believed caused all of this to happen was the simple fact that everyone was so terrified of the devil. They were just so terrified to the point where they would convict and accuse innocent women, innocent men that they've known their whole lives for conspiring with the devil when they had no proof. It was a dark and twisted time in history that I don't think should ever be repeated again.